Welcome into the FanDuel Hurry Up. I am Sean Guasamacchio. We are heading to Florida, right? From the West Coast to beautiful Florida for the Honda Classic in the PGA this week. And who better to break it all down than Jim Sanas from FanDuel.com. Jim, what a wonderful treat we had last week at the World Golf Championships in beautiful Mexico City. Rory McIlroy, another top five finish. He's not in it this weekend. A lot of the top 10 players are not playing this weekend, but one that is Brooks Koepka, who you have as your top value pick at 12,000 this week.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of risk around Brooks Koepka because, as most of you probably know, Brooks Koepka has this thing where he doesn't always try all that hard in non-majors. Who can blame him because it's a long, grinding season, and this is a non-major. The player's coming up a couple weeks away from now, so there is a scenario in which Brooks Koepka does not care about how he does this event. So you're trying to be risk averse. Maybe you pay for Tommy Fleetwood instead in this upper tier, but I do still like Brooks Koepka despite those concerns. He finished second here last year, and you look at his recent finishes, ever since that knee injury he had over the fall, they haven't been that great. But one of the bad finishes for Brooks was at the Genesis, and there he gained 1.7 strokes off the tee. He gained 3 on approach, so he played really well there. Just had a bad short game that week, leading to a 43rd place finish. That is in addition to finishing 17th at the Saudi International against some tough competition there. So it's not as if Brooks has been abysmal since coming back. And I also think that there is some thought to the potential narrative where Brooks wants to get ramped up for the players coming off of that injury and wants to get back into form. And there is no better place to do so than right here at the Honda Classic. So I think you can talk yourself into Brooks Koepka potentially trying for this event. And that's why I like it, because he is 8th in strokes gained off the tee in this field over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. He is 8th in approach. He is a good Bermuda putter. So anecdotal or statistically, there are a lot of reasons to like Brooks Koepka, and if he is locked in, he is easily the number one golfer in this field. That is why I'm going to go here. But if you are averse to the Brooks not caring narrative, I think that it makes sense to pivot away. So Brooks is my top guy this week. That is partially because I am okay with the risk associated with him, because I do want that upside, but there is definitely some ambiguity at the top end of this field. But for me, it will be Brooks Koepka as my number one guy.
And you mentioned it, Jim. He finished runner-up last year at this course and at this event at the Honda Classic. That is Brooks Koepka. He is your number one play. Someone who hasn't played this course since 2015, former world number one Justin Rose. Hasn't played great this year, as you know, Jim, but he's second on your list, 11,400. Justin Rose, what do you like about his game this week here at the Honda Classic?
Yeah, Sean, it's not just bad finishes this year for Justin Rose, but he's also lost strokes and approach in each of his past 2 events. And that's definitely a concern. But it's hard to tell whether those 2 events should erase what he did before that stretch. Let's look at the event he played just before those 2 bad events on the PGA Tour. That was at the Singapore Open. And there, Rose finished second, then turned around, flew to the Genesis, or at the Farmers Insurance Open. And he missed the cut there. Long travel, makes a lot of sense that he wouldn't do well, struggled the next time out. So, it kind of led to a bad string of events there for Justin Rose. But at the end of the Singapore Open, that was his 18th consecutive made cut. It was his 4th top 5 and his 6th top 10 in those 18 events. So he'd shown a lot of upside there, a lot of consistency, a lot of made cuts. So when I look at Justin Rose, to me, he kind of stands out as being a golfer who is just good relative to this field. Trying to target good golfers relative to the field has paid off the past 2 weeks with guys like Patrick Reed and guys like Adam Scott as well. So I want to take a similar approach this week with Justin Rose. Yes, the current form is concerning, but that Singapore Open was in 2020. It was after the new year. That's good. And the longer term form for Justin Rose is really, really encouraging. So we're getting him at a bit of a salary discount at $11,400 in a weird field that doesn't have a ton of top end guys. I'm willing to take some risks. Justin Rose is definitely a risk given how bad the approach play has been the past 2 events, but I think there is reason to still buy in despite that. You can jump down to a little bit of lower tier guys like Sung J M, Byung Han An. We got Daniel Berger down there too. I will not fault you for doing that, but I do think that Justin Rose is at least worth mentioning here at 11-4. He's got good long-term form. We know he's a very good golfer, great approach play on the longer term. So I'm inclined to buy into Justin Rose at $11,400, despite some very legitimate concerns about what he has done recently.
All right, you mentioned it, Jim. Justin Rose, a smart risk there at 11-4, as you mentioned. Someone that you have at 9,700, that Jason Kokrak, who finished tied for 51st, 2 over par last week at the World Golf Championships. Not a lot of money here, 9,700. All right, so there's some investment, but some value as well. What is it about Kokrak's game and play for this weekend with not a lot of top-end golfers, as you mentioned, that would be a nice play here at 9,700?
Yeah, whenever you decide to use Jason Kokrak, which is something I do probably more often than I should, you have to acknowledge that the putting is going to be bad. And that's just an accepted downside with Jason Kokrak. But they're on Bermuda putting surface for this week, and of the putting surfaces, that is the least bad number for Jason Kokrak. And I am wording it that way intentionally. It is not a good putting surface for him, but it is his least bad surface. So that's at least a positive for Jason Kokrak. And that's encouraging because everything else he does is so good that when he's less bad as a putter, he can really shine with his ball striking because he ranks 7th in this field in strokes gained off the tee over the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National. He is also 28th in approach and 49th in scrambling. So the rest of his game is pretty good, especially relative to this field. If we make the putting less of a concern, that can benefit Kokrak quite a bit. And he showed that he can handle these greens last year, came home with a 9th place finish. He's been struggling a bit recently, so there is still some concern for Kokrak. You mentioned the WGC Mexico. He had a couple of missed cuts before that as well. But hopefully a return to Bermuda greens can pay off for him and he can lean on that good ball striking and finally shine here. I don't like the 9,000 range all that much at all, but I do think that Kokrak is a guy who does stand out, given that his biggest weaknesses will be less of a concern this weekend than they usually are.
So if Jason Kokrak could get his putting under control, seems like a good value play right there at 9,700. Someone in the 9,000s that you have listed just below him, that's Kevin Streelman at 9,400. Talk to me about Kevin Streelman and the Honda Classic and how his game might play this weekend, and maybe we could get some great value here at 9,400 with Streelman.
In the interest of full transparency, I hate this entire tier. This tier is terrible. There are not a lot of golfers in this range who are all that enticing, but hey, we got to stick to the format, recommend someone who is in the low 9,000 range, and I guess that Kevin Streelman is a guy who stands out most there in that group. But in all honesty, if I can avoid this tier, I am going to try to do so. Now, the reason I gravitate towards Streelman, if I'm in this tier, is that he's kind of like Kokrak, where the ball striking is really good. And if I'm going to be in this tier, I want someone who has major strengths. And for Streelman, that is in his approach play. He is 9th in approach the past 50 rounds. He is 32nd in strokes gained off the tee. So the ball striking will be good. That means that Streelman will give himself opportunities for some birdies. There are going to be imperfections with everybody in this range, and we can point out all the imperfections as well. With Streelman, like Kokrak, it will be a short game. That is a major concern. So for cash games, I would like to avoid Streelman. I'd like to avoid this entire tier if possible, jump down to some cheaper guys, take some more risks down there. So maybe it's more of a tournament-based week this week just because of the way things shake out. But Streelman does strike the ball very well. That's encouraging for me if I do wind up in this tier. So it's a pretty bleak tier overall, but if I am here, I do think that Kevin Streelman is pretty easily my favorite guy in the mid 9,000 range.
All right, Jim, so let's get away from the 9,000 range there with Kevin Streelman, and let's go a little bit lower, and that's Brian Harman. You have listed 8,800. Is this a range that you like for Harman? A little bit of a long shot, I would gather, but for 8,800, is that what you're looking at here? Do you like this tier better than the 9,000 tier?
I like this tier better than the 9,000 tier because of Brian Harman. He is $8,800, and we know that Brian Harman is not going to win this event. But he's $8,800, and you don't really need a guy to win an event when he's that cheap. The thing that I love about Brian Harman is that he is super well-rounded statistically. I have 4 key stats I'm looking at for this weekend: strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, scrambling, and putting on Bermuda. And Brian Harman is top 30 in this field in all 4 of those stats. there is not a single other golfer in the entire field, regardless of salary, who checks all four boxes. So Brian Harman, well-rounded overall, but especially well-rounded for a guy who is $8,800. He has made 11 of his past 12 cuts. He has 5 top 20s in that span. And I know I'm not going to get a huge outing here. Like expecting a top 10 out of Brian Harman is asking too much. But if you can get this guy through the cut and get 4 rounds out of him and then get the high end outings out of your other guys in your lineup, you're still going to have a pretty good weekend for PGA DFS. So I know the upside is limited to Brian Harman, but the floor is very good. And just by making the cut, he is giving himself additional upside relative to guys in this range. So Brian Harman may not be the most exciting play, but he is a very well-rounded play. And I think his cut odds are very good. And he's someone I want to build around this week. Brian Harman could very well be the player I use most often while multi-entering for tournaments. So despite the lack of upside, I have a lot of faith in him, and he makes me like this range a whole heck of a lot more than I like the range right above this.
Harman at $8,800, but someone right below is Sam Burns at $8,500, and he's coming off a performance tied for 23rd at the Genesis Open, 4 under there. He missed the cut at the Phoenix Open, but seems like a great play this weekend, Sam Burns.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the Waste Management Phoenix Open, where he did miss the cut, and that is definitely a negative, but what I like about Burns is that his approach play has been really good recently. Even though the longer term form for Burns there is not very good, he's actually 102nd in approach the past 50 rounds. And that's bad even for a guy who's $8,500, but it's been a lot better recently. Over the past 4 events, Burns has gained at least 1.6 strokes in approach each time, and that does include the Waste Management Phoenix Open. There, he actually gained 3.9 strokes in approach, but he still missed the cut because his short game was pretty bad there, and that's definitely a negative. He also gained 2.7 strokes in approach at the American Express. So overall, the approach play has been getting better. If you look at Burns over a 50-round sample, approach has been his biggest weakness. He is actually 16th in strokes gained off the tee. He is also 5th in Bermuda putting. So if he can improve that approach play, he would suddenly shape up as being a really good option for DFS. And we have seen that approach play get better over the past 4 events. So I think we could see a change here in Sam Burns. He is still a really young guy. He's only 23 years old, so it makes sense we could see some improvement from Sam Burns. We have seen that recently, and it's in his biggest weakness, which had been his approach play. If you get that approach play better, his off the tee play can shine. He can putt, lights out in Bermuda. That all adds up really well. So Sam Burns, definitely a bit of a risk here just because we haven't seen the approach play be as good over a larger sample, but I think there's reason to believe it's getting better, and he has other strengths elsewhere too. If you don't want to gamble as much with Sam Burns, I do like Tom Hoge as well, $8,400, and Cameron Tringali at $8,300. Both those guys have better approach play over a larger sample, but I do like what Sam Burns provides. So got some options down here in the mid $8,000, which is why, again, I dislike that mid $9,000 range. Really good options here. Really good option with Brian Harman. And it pushes me towards going a bit more top heavy in a lot of my lineups for this weekend.
That'll do it for Jim Sass. When we come back, it's Davis Maddock as we continue the FanDuel Hurry Up. Jim, thanks for the time.
Thank you, Shaun. I appreciate it. Looking forward to what should be a fun event. And good luck with all your DFS and your betting this weekend.
We will be right back right after this. Welcome back to the FanDuel Hurry Up. We are now joined by Davis Maddock of DailyRoto.com for his best bets at the Honda Classic on the PGA Tour. Davis, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Bryson, he came very close to winning the WGC Mexico, 3-putted on the 17th green. So that wasn't the best, but overall, a good golf tournament last week. Really looking forward to this week.
Bryson not in this field, though, as he finished runner-up, as you said, on that bogey on 17. But someone who is Justin Rose, former world's #1 golfer, but hasn't played well this year. He's 20-1 to win this tournament. What do you like about those odds for Justin this weekend?
So when Justin Rose is healthy, when he is comfortable with his playing environment and everything, he really is the best long iron player in the world. I would say he's probably even better than Rory, even better than DJ. And, right now he's the 13th ranked golfer in the world, but I think he's a little bit better than that. And his recent form has started to turn around a little bit as well. So I just think 20-1 in kind of a weaker field just seems a little bit low for Justin Rose.
Someone a little bit further down the list there, as far as odds are concerned, 55-1, that would be JT Posten. Finished in the Genesis Open, tied for 30th a couple of weeks ago, did not play in Mexico City at the World Golf Championships. What about JT's game this week that you like, 55-1?
So we have a really interesting golf tournament this week where Brooks Koepka and Tommy Fleetwood are kind of the co-favorites. And, they really are not of the dominant tier of golfer of Dustin Johnson, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas. They're a tier lower than that. So what that means is I think there's a ton of value in the 40 to 80-1 range, and Poston is just one of those guys who has a game that fits PGA National, really good with his long irons, has a good short game, is capable of making putts, and a big part of this golf course is just avoiding trouble, and Poston has a game that really allows him to not be hitting a ton of water balls.
Let's go back a little bit to a 22-1 favorite, Billy Horschel, the Florida native, playing well. I mean, he's had 2 top 10 finishes the last 2 times out, finished tied for 9th last week at the World Golf Championships in Mexico City. 22-1 seems like good value here.
Yeah, Horschel is another one of those guys who is not viewed as one of the highest, top tier golfers in the world, and he isn't. But when Billy Horschel gets a lot of good results, it comes on the back of amazing putting. And while we don't think that that's a skill that he carries with him 100% of the time, I do personally believe in kind of short-term form for Billy Horschel. And he is, when playing well, he really does gain some of the most strokes putting per round of anyone that you're going to see. And he does have, good strokes gained tee to green, good, strokes gained around the green numbers relative to this field. So Horschel, I think, is again a guy who has a pretty attractive price to me in this market.
Yeah, very attractive, especially with the way he is playing last 2 times out. Should be very favorable at 22-1. 2 top 10 finishes at this course the last 5 years. That's Billy Horschel. All right, that's 22-1. Let's move a little bit further down the odds. 80-1, you have Johnny Vegas here. Has only missed a cut at this course once in the last 10 years. How about Johnny Vegas?
So I think Vegas is just for sure my favorite play this week at 80-1. He's 6th on tour this year in strokes gained off the tee. Doesn't gain a ton of strokes elsewhere, but as I've already mentioned, I'm not betting anything at all on Brooks Koepka or Tommy Fleetwood. So I would like to be betting a ton of guys, kind of in between 80, 150. I want to bet a lot of deep guys at this tournament. But Vegas is a guy who has good results on tour this year. Had a good result last week at the Puerto Rico Open. I think he shot a 62 on Sunday there. So he can go really low. And, he is also just capable of scoring on a course that is not going to provide a ton of scoring opportunities. So really like Johnny Vegas this week at PGA National.
And Davis, a longer shot you have here, 130-1. Wow, that's a long shot here. Matt Jones, but he has a previous top 5 finish at this course. How about Matt Jones, 130-1? Can he pull it off here this weekend?
So Matt Jones is he's just kind of your stereotypical PGA Tour grinder. He's hung around a long time, doesn't win very often, but makes a lot of cuts. Is a good putter, has a good short game, and right now he's just kind of like, maybe Jason Kokrak from last year, Lucas Glover from last year, just a longtime PGA Tour grinder who's really hitting a good vein of form at a really opportune time for getting results. So, at 130-1, our friends over at Data Golf think he really is probably more like 100-1 kind of a bet. So at 130-1 at the FanDuel Sportsbook, we are going to go ahead and take that value.
Seems like good value there, Davis. How about Rory Sabbatini, 90-1, previous winner at this course for the South African. Rory Sabbatini, does he have a chance here with these long odds to maybe crack the top 5 and pull off the upset and win here at the Honda Classic?
So we'd feel a little bit better about Sabbatini had this bet taken place last year when he turned into a long-term PGA Tour grinder who just hit this crazy vein of form and was seemingly getting T10s every single week. But we do still, we think of things in terms of adjusted baselines over the last year, over the last 50 rounds, things like that. So Sabbatini is still just a guy who, if you look at his baselines, is just a little bit underpriced at the numbers you can get him right now. And, decent course fit. He's not going to be swallowed up by all the water and the trouble that can be found on this golf course.
Davis Maddox, best bets for the Honda Classic. You can catch Davis at dailyroto.com. And for the record, he likes Johnny Vegas, 80-1 as his best bet of this weekend. Thanks a lot for the time, Davis.
Thanks for having me, guys, and hopefully we come back with more winners next week.
Once again, thanks to Davis Maddock and Jim Sonis for all the information. This is Sean Guasamacchia for the FanDuel Hurry Up. We'll see you next time.